Why is shame such a powerful emotion? How does it affect us mentally, physically, emotionally? I'm Nadia Davis. I'm a mom, author, attorney, and Kundalini yoga teacher who has experienced public shaming that brought me to my knees. On this podcast, I'm going to tell you how I'm living the work taking shame out of the shadows. I'll give you real-life advice and skills to take away with you throughout your day. You'll hear from powerful guests who have overcome trauma and emerged stronger than ever. You too can ban the shame within and around you. Join me. You are not alone. Welcome home, everybody. Today you have Dr. Stephan Poulter and I, Nadia. I'm super happy that you're back here because our conversation today is following up with a holiday tip episode we did, which I encourage you to check out. And today we're going to continue on this tool-based, practical way of transforming shame, identifying it and transforming it to your benefit. What does that all mean? For me, I had to find a way, like I had to write a map about what on earth was going on inside me. And teaching my kids today to put a name on feelings is kind of part of that. Then there was going back to childhood and identifying these core beliefs and these core wounds. Now, all of that sounds fine and dandy, but I know those feelings and road, treatment, jail, hospitalizations, and recovery. All of that was from what I believe is like the most unrecognized part of the human existence. We feel separate. We feel separate from each other, from our quote unquote true selves. And I explain what that means. But we have this sense of defectiveness for feeling anything at all. And that, in Dr. Poulter's beautiful mind, is shame. It's a secret belief we are defective. And why is that? We're spirits in a human body with a mind, and we have a heart, and we have feelings. Why is the most immediate feeling this shame?
I get asked that question a lot, and there's a duality in life, as there is life and death, winter and summer, light and dark, and that's just part of this life. It's part of the school of life. There's this duality. I tell people, don't get caught up in the why versus how do I resolve it? How do I rise above it, of this delusion that you're not good enough or I'm not good enough? So, and it's a belief. It's not a fact. Because you feel something doesn't make it a fact. And that's part of your core beliefs. Because people think feeling something is fact. No, it's not.
Now, I'm going to share something.
Yeah.
Surviving a near-death car accident and that experience gave me the blessing, ironically, of a place to seek to get to in this body and mind, because I was given a chance to live. And so, I know that these feelings and these thoughts separated me from what I experienced there. Past, present, future, time isn't linear. Everything made sense. And so the quest to try and help people understand how these feelings and this sense of shame separates us from what I saw and I know is truth. We are all connected. We are all whole, divine, and complete. Let's understand the middle. Let's understand our soul and then our mind and how it's separating us from that truth. That is like the bigger message. And so our feelings, let's allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And if there's one thing that I can teach my kids, if you cannot find that place outside you to share, to cry, to feel it all, whatever the feelings are, whatever they are, anytime. if you can't find that place outside you, you can create that place within you. And it was a long journey to get to the point of feeling a home within. And so
Hmm.
today is the nuts and bolts, how we can use those feelings to our advantage and get connected. And so, Dr. Poulter, the
So
psychology of feelings.
all of it.
I learned,
Nadia, what you
yeah,
just said is very, very important. Um, Mental health is based on integration. Mental health is based on not being fragmented. It's being
right.
integrated and connected. That's mental health. I get
Yes.
asked all. I get asked all the time. So, am I healthy? What? Of course you are. Or you wouldn't ask that question. People who are really not right don't ask that question. They don't. You know, it's like someone asks you, "Am I drinking too much?" Of course you're drinking too much. Why would you ask that
Mhm.
question?
Right.
Am
Right.
I? Yeah. Am I
Am
doing
I
this?
doing, and the opposite? Am I doing enough? Oh, did I
Correct.
do that well enough
Right.
right now? And,
Sometimes the opposite is the answer. But
right.
your mental health is the umbrella, the CEO of your life.
Hmm.
Your psychology is your core beliefs. Your emotions are how those beliefs, like a domino, how
Got it.
they impact how you emotionally connect to the world. And your feelings are the feedback.
I get
In
it.
my new book, Modern Masculinity, mental health is the umbrella.
Okay.
It's Starbucks. Okay, but inside of Starbucks is the coffee machine. That's your
Hmm.
psychology that integrates everything, and your emotions are the outcome of that. And your feelings are what outside the store.
What helped me to
Mm-hmm.
separate to get out of the shame of
Right.
believing I was my emotions
Mm-hmm.
is what you just said, like the psychology, the emotions. I had to
Yes.
see that all of that was mind made, and that
Correct.
my mind
Yes.
is in my body, that's
Mm-hmm.
carrying my soul, is survivalist in nature. So that's kind of the
Right.
terminology that I use for us. It's like we are trying to survive. And this isn't some drastic statement or whatever, but that's just the human spirit is in a body and our mind is survivalist in nature. So for me, understanding the psychology and kind of separating myself a little bit to lower the shame, my psychology and my emotions are based on surviving.
Correct. And Nadia, that near death experience you had and the things you went through impact the coffee machine. And what gets poured into it is what we have control of.
Okay.
It impacts that coffee machine. And the outcome is our emotions, and our feelings are outside the building, how we interact with that. But what you did was you changed what you're putting in the machine. Therefore, the output tasted much better.
Well, now I know why I like coffee so much, because it's been pouring
There's
in
our
some good stuff, some good
right.
creamer and some good stuff now.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what, so shame interrupts what goes into into your psychology. It
Okay.
intrudes. And the, today we want to talk about resolution.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, I see it all over, they're talking about shame. And then I read about, okay, so it's great we identify the problem, but who's talking about solutions? You know,
We are talking about
like
solutions
correct.
today, and I call it advocating for your soul, your true self, your truth. So
Okay.
listen
And I
in,
think
folks.
guys,
You're going to advocate for
and I
love,
think
your true self, and truth. How?
absolutely. And men, usually they got two questions. Do you want my support or do you want me to fix it? And I always laugh, well, I want you to fix this one, but this is inside of you.
Okay.
All right. You've got the support, but now you've got to fixing it is the first step is acknowledging.
Okay.
And there's 7 common things that how to um, put red flags on the dashboard of your life. The fear of embarrassment is one of them. Another one is for men particularly, women get shamed if they have too much anger, if they express anger, if they are angry, and if men scare people with their anger. That's a big one.
Hmm.
Another one is very common is the imposter syndrome. And that is
Hmm.
if people get too close to me, they see I'm a fraud. That
Hmm.
is hands down undiluted shame.
Hmm.
That is a faulty belief system about yourself. And the good news is it is faulty. That means you can also fix it, heal it, resolve it.
The imposter syndrome, everybody
Huge.
can relate to. Come on, folks. I mean, this is where
Mm-hmm.
you're going in and you feel like you have to armor up. You feel like you have to present. You feel like
Yeah,
everything is about presentation. And
right.
because you feel that people will see, oh, I'm actually kind of physically hurting. I'm actually angry. I'm actually really sad.
Or maybe
That
I'm
is
not.
the imposter syndrome. That's
Mm-hmm.
how it shows up for me.
I and for me sometimes, well, maybe not smart enough, or you should know all this. But that's great. I don't need to be the smart one. I just need to be competent. That's how I deal with it. I need to
Love
be
that.
competent. And when you're competent, I tell for men, we'll get to that in a minute, but imposter syndrome is really a quick window into what's going on inside of you. Another one is isolation. And we
Can
know
you
it's,
tell me how did it feel for you? We want other men. There's in a
I
nutshell.
think for men,
Yeah.
they're reluctant to put themselves out there. They're reluctant. Now, I'm not talking the false bravado of
Mm-hmm.
the old masculinity, the John Wayne syndrome, or
Mm-hmm.
present day, it's terrible to even mention his name, but Jeffrey Epstein, where you have all the money and fame and position, you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
That that's compensating for what's not inside of you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's compensating that. And for men, it's the idea they're not enough, tall enough, good enough, make enough money. Get a lot of guys with that one. Equate their self worth with their net worth. And if their net
Okay.
worth is high, their self worth is high, and that's faulty, very faulty.
So first you said fear of embarrassment and emotional paralysis, and it's a
Correct. Number
inner.
two, yeah.
It deals with self acceptance,
Hmm.
um, embarrassment. Okay, and then number two is the feeling angry, invisible, or worthless,
Yeah.
a distorted view of yourself. Number three is
Correct.
this imposter syndrome. Why is
It,
it that we feel like a fraud? Because
hmm
for it's hiding our feelings. It's like for some reason or another, we feel anything we're going through makes us defective. And then that leads to this sense of fraud.
Correct.
It's the
Because
core belief behind it.
no one's bulletproof and no one's invincible. And I
Hmm.
think when vulnerability, you mentioned that earlier, is one of the keys to the way out of this maze. We'll go back to all that. Okay.
Okay.
Isolation.
Three,
You know,
isolation.
but we can go through this
Number
real quick, but I
four.
really want to talk about how to deal with this. Okay. Because I think
Yes.
we've described these before, but now I
Okay.
really want to talk about what for guys and for moms and women, how do we do this?
Okay. Number
Isolation, feeling,
four, isolation.
yep,
Number five, feeling suspicious,
not
untrusting
trusting
people.
of
Okay.
people. And another one, number six, a lot of times, fear of intimacy. You can only be so close to people, and that is unequivocally um, unresolved childhood trauma. Something's happened in your past
Hmm.
where you just can't let someone get too close. And the
Okay.
other thing, number seven is underrated. People pleasing, fear of criticism,
Okay.
codependence, highly underrated.
Okay.
Emotional cancer to me is codependence because your life is based on someone else's opinion of you. That's
Okay,
dangerous.
we can relate to all
Mm-hmm.
categories of these emotions. This is just giving you some idea, a big picture of the
Mm-hmm.
emotional triggers and how shame might show up. I did a core wound series, and it kind of is a different way of like mapping out what these
Sure.
beliefs were from childhood and how shame showed up. And that was
Mm-hmm.
like fear of abandonment, a feeling of separation. So that's the isolation. And
Right.
it really helped to kind of have these blocks of categories of different
Mm-hmm.
emotions and ways that shame might show up. So those
Right.
seven are great.
Because what it does, Nadia, is ultimately we're more alike than we are different. We're more
Yes.
similar. We're more similar than not. And
Yes.
these seven triggers are universal. They're not isolated to this country or any particular race, creed, or color or wealth. It's universal. And it shows up in as many different ways as there are people. But the
It's so
denominator,
interesting. It's so interesting because I could literally put a chapter title next to any of these categories.
hmm
Like, like it's so well organized out, and it's universal. This hits
hmm
why shame is so rampant in the human existence. All of these categories. I
yeah,
mean, it's great.
and people spend a lifetime. I know I'm speaking about men, not to the exclusion of women, but a lot of guys in my
I'll
office
speak for that.
believe
Hmm.
that they have enough money or external success. A lot of guys do very well career wise or finance, hedge funds, and it's almost like they get a free pass for this inner work. But what happens, they get to a certain age, 45, 50, kids have gone to college, and all of a sudden the bill comes due because you can work on 1/4 of your life, but the other 75% of you is going to require attention at some point. It can happen. It needs to be a heart attack, a stroke, a divorce, something happened. You lose your job. All of a sudden, the other 75% of your life goes, "Hey, wait, it's been out of balance for too long."
Exactly.
And the reason why it's out of balance is because you don't feel good about yourself. Bottom line, you don't feel good. Because if you felt good about yourself, it wouldn't be out of balance. It just wouldn't be. It would be more grounded, more level, more integrated. And it's hard for guys to talk about this, particularly imposter syndrome, or fear of criticism. All of them, they're difficult. Women, I think, are much better at it. Genuinely, I think the
Hmm.
sisterhood is embracing, and that's the key. As we talk to men, the key is having a couple of men in your life you can be transparent with. If you're
A lot
transparent,
of these, yes, go ahead.
shame can't exist.
Right.
It's
Yes.
impossible. If you're transparent, shame's got to go. Turn the lights on; it's no
Yes.
longer dark. It's
So
that simple.
why? Yes.
You
And
turn the
it's
lights on;
so
it's not dark.
freeing. Yes.
That's
So,
why AA is so strong because it exposes the secret.
yes,
When you expose the secret, everything's a whole lot easier to deal with.
it's up to the individual to be fully honest
Correct.
in that group and with themselves.
So now I
So,
would ask, you're
yeah,
as a
I
woman.
want to encourage
Yeah. Okay.
um, we as women, we feel this sense of abandonment and this isolation. This number 4 you pointed out. I did a whole
hmm
podcast episode on the fear of abandonment, and that overlaps with some of these other things because we have I had this fear of abandonment. I had this perfectionism. I had, this grin and bear it mode. And again, it all
hmm
related to, will I be rejected? I mean, from childhood, early on, we wake up in the morning and feel we have to be a certain way, look a certain way as woman. And if you
hmm
really look behind it, I know throughout my life, it all came from this feelings of rejection, defectiveness, and inadequacy. I think is
You know,
really the common denominator for many.
so Nadia, for all these 7 people ask me, like, okay, doc, so what do I do now? I've got this information. What do I do? I
Right.
tell people, uh, 3 things we're going to talk about. One is like the mapping you're doing.
The mapping.
I always ask people, what's the narrative in your head? What's the narrative? Everyone's got one.
Everyone has one.
Everyone has one.
And
Go
what
ahead.
helped me and is helping others is when we close our eyes with breath or wherever you are in life, there's going to
hmm
be one memory, one or two memories. Like it can even come
hmm
from a visual that you've held on to as a child.
hmm
What is that one narrative in your
Correct.
head? And what scene, quote unquote, does it come from? Because that defines our relationship to the world. Like yours was the glasses and that
Yeah.
experience that you explained. Mine was feeling like I'm in the closet. So
Yeah.
so think
Very
about
powerful.
that. What is that one narrative? What is that one scene kind of
Yeah.
that keeps coming up in your head?
That's a really good point, Nadia, because I always ask people, tell me, tell me about the first time you felt embarrassed. And usually feeling embarrassed is like, it could be a lot of things, A to Z. I've heard many stories from school, home, family stuff. And that's usually where the question about without proper emotional support at home, which a lot of us didn't get, we're not blaming, it's just a fact. That's where these beliefs started taking root.
Okay.
That's where the seeds got planted.
Okay.
It's our job to pull the roots out, not mow it over. Don't mow the weeds, just pull them out. Because when you pull them out,
Got it. So
they're
first
not keep
question,
growing.
what is the belief about yourself?
Yeah, what's your inner narrative?
Okay. Inner narrative.
Number two, when did you first think that thought?
Okay. I mean, for me
Mm-hmm.
and universally, it was this
Yeah.
sense of separation from others and
Mm-hmm.
this feeling of defectiveness that made me fear rejection.
Okay, and then the
That's explained all.
very well. Then the third point I ask people, what's the counter to that belief? What's the rebuttal to that misnomer about you?
That all of our true selves are whole, divine, and complete and unchanged by any
Your true
thought.
self is. I always make it first person.
My true self
Yes.
is infinite, divine, complete, and unchanged by anything anyone has said or done, including myself.
Very
That
powerful.
is the home within.
And the fourth step, what action can you take with the new narrative? What's an action you can take to offset that? Because action changes our experience.
Home is within you.
Mm-hmm. But
It,
what's the action? There's always something you
a,
can do.
a new narrative, a mantra, a breath,
Mm-hmm.
a reminder of self that is a thought.
Yeah.
It isn't me.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thought and only that of my mind, but I am not my mind. That's what I
I
do.
okay. I agree. I think for a lot of people who maybe don't have as much insight or that
That's the
belief
little
system,
girl. It's the little girl.
I think for a lot of men that if they don't make enough money or they're not athletic enough, they're not good enough. I cannot
I see.
tell you how pervasive that is. I'm telling you that is so underrated.
Well, you know
I,
what? Between what you're saying now and
mm-hmm.
between where I was able to go, the
Yeah.
middle step is there's a little boy and there's a little girl
Yes. It
in
needs to be
us.
embraced.
And that's where the feelings are. So
Yeah.
that is, it's like I can tell her, I can tell, I can see the
Mm-hmm.
little boy in a man and
Correct.
say, that is your reality. That your truth is that you feel
Mm-hmm.
this way. You have all these wonderful things about you and these valuable items and these successes. How are you feeling within? And do you know that you are whole, divine, and complete, like how I speak to my sons?
Right. So going back to the inner narrative,
Okay.
Nadia, that is every culture's got one. Every father's got one. Mom's got one. Kids have one. Until identifying that is very courageous. People talk about Pandora's box. That's blowing the lid off the box.
Yes.
You want to blow the lid off? Talk about your core belief, because that opens the door to a lot of stuff that might have gotten shoved way, way down there. And you don't.
Absolutely. And it's a way that we've related to the world and ourselves for our whole
Correct.
life.
Yep. You know,
The
knowing that
inner
core belief,
narrative.
the inner narrative, because that offsets. You can't be an imposter when you start dealing with your inner narrative.
Right.
You can't be embarrassed or feel that people see you. You've already outed yourself in a great way.
Right. And you
No one's
feel
going to
less
out you.
alone. It's
Yeah.
like you're looking at your little boy or little girl in the face, and that's all that's needed. You walk into a room and there's no
Hmm.
feeling of fraud. You're
Right. And you know what?
listening.
It's hard because I get a lot of people get caught up in codependency, placating, people pleasing. And it's hard. We'll talk about how to have boundaries, but knowing that their opinion about you isn't as important as the opinion about yourself.
Yes.
And that is part of what eradicates shame. You want to, flush shame down the drain. Who do you give your power to? Probably
Now
that inner
there's a
narrative.
tricky point there, because
Hmm.
we may be deluding ourselves with blame, with I did everything right. And so
Correct.
this is honest narrative.
Oh yeah, we're talking. I always use the analogy in every relationship. It's a tennis game. You only own
Mhm.
100 of your 50. It takes two to play tennis, and no one is completely responsible for the outcome of that game. You're
Mhm.
participating too.
Right. But
And
it takes
I'll tell
some,
you, that's really
yes.
hard for a lot of guys. They're finger pointing. I go, you're not blaming your wife. You're blaming your mother.
And
This
it's shame
predates us.
projected. That's what
Yeah.
blame is.
Yeah. Blame is, it's all related. Now, but when you start taking responsibility, and that's part of the inner narrative,
Okay.
that inner narrative, if that's all we ever talk about, that's handing someone a Maserati and say, have a good drive. They're going to get someplace.
Yes.
The potential's unlimited. It's up to them to drive it. It's up to them. And I find with men, when they start dealing with their inner narrative, they stop. A lot of things change, and particularly addictive behaviors.
Yes.
They go out the window. They can't coexist. I mean,
Yes.
you know about this very well, personally and professionally. You know about that. But I get guys that are addicted to uh, the internet or different venues on that. And once we start dealing with your core belief, that inner narrative, you don't need that addiction.
Right.
You can
Because it's
tolerate.
all avoiding. It's
Right.
all
We're doing
avoiding
that work,
that
not it.
little wounded boy or girl,
Hmm.
and it's shame that is
See,
causing.
and I tell men, part of mental health for men is being able to tolerate vulnerability.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about standing in front of a crowd telling your life story. Vulnerability with yourself. I believe 2 out of 3 women have been inappropriately touched at one point in their life. Terrible. I wish I didn't know that, but that's been my professional experience. And I believe at least 1 out of 4 men have been inappropriately touched. Maybe it's 1 out of 3. And of that group, no one talks, particularly men.
No
Women are
one.
much better. Yeah, women
And
are much better at talking about it.
gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because
Women are great about that. I love that. And
it is
women want
only in
men.
that knowing that this narcissistic personality disorder and stuff we see out there, we know that those men that are doing nothing but blaming and projecting shame have had a very deep wound in their past,
Oh,
that there is
I
hidden
mean,
abuse, and that belief that we're talking
hmm,
about, that inner narrative that
yes,
arrives, and they're nothing but trying to prove that narrative wrong in all the wrong
correct.
ways.
Very well said. And we're not simplifying narcissism. I find that someone who's obnoxiously self-centered has been incredibly violated at some point in their past.
No empathy. It's
A
bizarre.
lack of empathy goes back to something very dramatic happened, a style of parenting, um, men who were molested. No one wants to talk about it, whether it be verbally, emotionally, or literally. That sets the stage for I got to cover this up.
It's the most severe lack of an ability to find that inner narrative and
Well,
be
it's a
honest with
very
self.
I don't want. There's a lot of things that are severe, but one of them is not looking inside your life. If you're not
Yes.
doing that, you're driving with your eyes closed. You're going
So
to hit a tree. you're going to run off the road of life.
Right. Absolutely. And yes, the truth always comes out in the end. So that's on an extreme. Now, moving away from that, if
Mm-hmm.
somebody is working with you and they're handed and what this narrative, all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, okay, I see. There was this fear of abandonment, and they're handed that
Mm-hmm.
Maserati. Slowly, then the fear, the
Yep.
rejection, the isolation, and all of that starts lifting off.
Correct.
And even through
Dissipating.
relapses, there's more and more discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the most powerful thing, and the opposite of
You know,
the condition you just talked about.
see, we're on a spiritual journey. Okay, call it your life path, call it your life journey. It's a spiritual journey, and people kind of balk and get weird about it. It's okay, but part of it is our healing is getting reconnected to our best self inside of us.
Yes.
And we talk about shame is mud on the gold brick inside of you. It's mud. And I talk about people say, what's toxic masculinity? I mean, rather than talk about that, I want to talk about what healthy masculinity is integrating. You're dealing with that lost boy inside of you.
Yes.
Because when you deal with a lost boy, a lot of things are resolved. And women know it. Women know a guy who's resolved his lost boy. He doesn't need to tell you, you just feel it. He feels safe. You can talk to him. He's not dangerous, in quotes. He's not dangerous. I ask
And
women
thank
all the
you
time,
for
does he feel
reaffirming that
dangerous?
that exists.
Yeah, maybe not physically, but emotionally or verbally, and that is because that lost boy in him hasn't been civilized, healed,
Exactly.
spoken to lovingly. And men need that. And I'm
Men
not
do
trying
need that.
to listen, I'm not um, um, excluding women, but women are on the path. They want guys to get on the path with them. They want their partners, their sons, their husbands, their brothers. Come on, come on, come on, join us.
Join us, and home is within you is the path to do that
Yes.
within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So after we identify these narratives, then what is the next step? We're standing at the cliff. We're standing on the side of the road of,
What's the
we see the big,
identifying that narrative? What's the
we see our
rebuttal?
inner child. Okay, what's the rebuttal?
Rebuttal, because the rebuttal brings you back to present day. Because the goal is to separate the past from the present. If you're in the present, your life's a lot easier. I mean, all the gurus talk about that for 10,000 years. You live in the present, you're in mastery.
Reminding ourselves of our true infinite selves and the
Mm-hmm.
truth, regardless of whatever is going on around us.
Correct.
Later in life, when I had separation from my kids and it was
Mm-hmm.
nothing but the system and everything outside me, defective, defective, defective.
Yeah.
Ironically, it really was at that point where I was discovering the inner narrative, and then I created a new narrative and belief that through meditation and breath that got me to the point of recognizing that truth I saw in the near-death car accident. And
Mm-hmm.
the more and more I reminded myself with that new belief, that new narrative, the easier it became to face my own shame and then the outside shaming.
The narrative is lifelong.
Yes.
As Gandhi said, you're healing to the day you leave here. He didn't stop once he liberated India. He kept going. All right.
Because we're in a mind. Yeah, it'll come up all the
Correct.
time.
It's a fluid process. It's not a destination. We know that. It's a process. And what you've done is that narrative, the rebuttal to it will continue to evolve. Nadia, you've done your book. You're doing this work. You're working with more and more people. That's expanding your rebuttal. That's
Okay.
expanding your rebuttal. So you've got the
Yes.
platform. Now you're building the building. See, it'd be excited to see where you are 3 years now, because you won't be the same woman you are now in a great way.
Mm-hmm.
You've already done the fork in the road. You've already done the hardest work was to acknowledge it. And guys, if you acknowledge it, you're not getting divorced.
That's so true.
Yeah, 75. Jonathan Gutman, forgive me, I always quote him. one of my life goals is to meet with him personally, and I will. I just need to make that happen. Is he interviewed 4,400 women after they got divorced. His team. Why'd you get divorced? 70% said one thing: my husband wasn't vulnerable. He would not share that with me because his narrative. Okay, my translation. The other 30%, they should get divorced. This is weird stuff. Okay, nobody argues that 30,
Gosh,
but
you hit
7,
that
yeah,
on a nail.
yeah, that 70%, that's in here. I got a guy in my office right now, literally last night. I think my wife's gonna leave me. Be honest with her. About what? How about the fact you were, something terrible happened in your childhood? No, no, no. It's a
And
lot
how
cheaper than
you've responded to the pain of
how
that.
you've wanted to
Yes.
offset that. You're a great guy. Stop running. Who are you running from? And they look at me like they
You
saw a
hit it on
ghost.
a nail. Yeah.
I go, who are you running from? I go, I don't care who you talk to at the end of the day. They're going to tell you the same. Come home. Your book. Home within. And and for men, see, women love to because they want to help their guy. They want to help him. I mean,
They
my wife
can't
wants help.
if he's not being
Yeah,
honest and
yeah.
vulnerable.
I mean, I've got 2 sons. I want them to be. I want their best strength to be their emotional aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're emotionally aptitude, they're going to have positive, fulfilling relationships with their wife, partners, gay or straight, doesn't matter, but they're going to have very positive relationships that enhance their life and the people around them.
And
And if
and
you're doing that,
this,
Nadia, and like your
yes,
kids, you're teaching them that your narrative keeps expanding. It's not one and done. It's one and starting.
yes.
It's
That's
one
why I
and now
have
you're starting.
feelings charts on the wall. And I
Yep.
can tell you the extreme experiences in relationship where one was so unable to connect to that little boy.
Mm-hmm.
Their fear caused them to breach my trust, and I still was understanding, and they still couldn't be connected with their inner child and
Mm-hmm.
be honest with how they handled the pain. Still, and then it became this narcissistic kind of projection.
Okay.
But then on the opposite extreme, one, years later, in a different time in life, able to, it was beginning that work. And so the discussion and the dialogue, actually,
Mm-hmm.
we both grew through the relationship and amicably ended it. And it just very different. And it all depends on each individual having that relationship with their inner child to be able to be honest with others.
Nadia, women want, tell me if this is true or false. Women want a man more than anything else who has has empathy is the ability to identify with you. But I can't have empathy unless I've developed compassion for myself. If I
Yes.
don't have compassion, I don't have shit. Pardon my
And
language.
you know what? Once that starts happening too,
Mm-hmm.
they get so scared.
Let me run this by
Right
you.
at the cusp, they had revealed more to me than anybody in their life, they said. And it's like the exact opposite. It's just such a fear. And
Correct.
it makes me
Narcissism.
sad for the men in the world. It
Yeah,
really does. Your book is getting
we're gonna
us
get there.
past that. It's
Yeah,
going to get
we're,
us there.
we're gonna get us there. We're all getting there together. And the
Yes.
idea is, I ask them, what's the most important thing you want in a partner? And the answer I've gotten is they want a man that can engage with them, engage emotionally, mentally, spiritually, not just physically. Physically is great too. Not minimizing, but that can't be the glue because that's not
And
going
you
to hold.
can't fake that.
No, you can't.
Woman can read through a facade like
Read
no
right through it.
heartbeat. Yeah.
Read right through it because as they say, a good intimate relationship starts in the kitchen, and that's talking, that's connecting, spending
Yes.
time together, and that's being kind.
And
When in
it's a
doubt, be kind.
beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
relationships are opportunities to heal. Every
Well,
time
they
we
are.
get
That's the
triggered by
purpose.
another, that's where we go back to the theme of this
Yep.
episode. Every time we are triggered, it's an opportunity to go back and talk to that little boy and little girl within us and say, what came up? What
So,
needs to be processed? And then
so
process that on our own rather than projecting, and maybe share about that learning and
Before
experience
you
with
can
the
share,
other.
Nadia, before you can share, you got to own it.
Yes.
Okay? I heard what you just said. That's maybe step number 4. First of all, you have to acknowledge there is a narrative. And number 2, what is it and what does it say about you?
Acknowledge the narrative.
And
What
sit
is
with
it and what does it say about you?
you.
And then a
Okay,
counter narrative.
correct. Let's stop there. That's as far as we need to go in this podcast, okay? Because I don't want
Well,
this to
what
get
was number 4? You said one thing.
1, what's the narrative? 2, what's the rebuttal to it? All right. And I think before we get to knowing those 2 steps, that
Okay.
allows you to sit with yourself and start to take different action in your life. And fourthly, it allows you to connect with yourself and the most important people in your life.
And all it takes, folks, what helped me, we can sit in a quiet space of our own and breathe deeply and just say, hey, little one, what's going on today? Just start with that.
I think with men, that's awesome. I think a lot of men need to hear, you're okay.
Yes.
You're okay. When I tell men they're okay, the door opens. Women
Hey, everyone.
are nurturers, and I love that. But in order for guys to experience nurturing, you have to say, okay, I'm okay. I can take that in. If you don't feel okay, you can't sit down. You can't stop moving. If you don't feel okay, until you feel okay, you feel your emotions, your psychology, your mental health. We're going backwards. We're starting at the core
You gotta get to that point
where you're okay.
before the end of life that we are okay with
Let me tell
sitting
you,
with ourselves and the little one inside
you
there
know,
in our home.
as a mom, you want your son or daughter to marry someone, have a relationship with someone who is okay with themselves. If they're okay with themselves, they're okay with them.
Yes.
And that is gold. That makes
That
it
is
work.
gold.
That's gold.
Okay, we're
Unrefined.
aiming for that. Thank you, Dr. Poulter. Check out the next episode, folks, because
Yes.
it's a follow-up on this, okay?
Let's do this. Come on. Come on, you
Sending
guys.
warm hugs. Download
And
the Mind, Body, Spirit app and send me a message through the open app tab.
wherever
Sending
you
warm
are,
hugs.
warm hugs, and wherever you are listening to this, just what's the narrative? That's all I want you to think about today.
Perfect.
What is that narrative? Thank you.
You are not alone. If you are dealing with shame and trauma, please reach out to me through my website, nadia-davis.com. You can get a free band shame tip sheet and find out about upcoming events. I'd love it if you picked up my book, Home is Within You, wherever books are sold. If you like this podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review, and make sure to follow me on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sending warm hugs.